Hello everybody, today we're going to go over some more advanced concepts in outlining your speech. A speech outline is very similar to a paper outline. So if you've outlined papers, you pretty much know how to outline a speech. You're going to start with your introduction. You're going to transition into your first main points. That's going to be the body of the speech. You might have one main point, you might have 3 main points, you might have 10 main points based on how long your speech is. Then you're going to have your conclusion, and then you want to supply a bibliography of material you used in your speech. That's the basics. So let's start with introduction. Your introduction should be written out and memorized. Now your whole speech shouldn't be memorized. You should have rehearsed it enough that you're comfortable and you can remember it with a few key guidelines, either from a PowerPoint or from notes that you have. But your introduction should be memorized. Now your introduction is going to be fairly short, particularly if you're not giving a long speech. If you're giving an hour-long speech, your introduction might be a little bit longer. But for most speeches that you would be giving, your introduction is going to be fairly short and easy to memorize. Because you have it memorized, this is going to help you connect and maintain that connection with your audience right from the beginning, because you can look them right in the eye and just start in on your speech. People in the audience are going to decide pretty quickly whether or not you're interesting or not, so you really want to catch them from the very beginning. Why do you have an introduction? It's to get the audience ready to listen to the rest of your speech. And there are 5 steps in an introduction. Number 1 is the attention getter. Number 2 is significance. Number 3 is credibility. 4 is thesis statement. 5 is preview. And then you transition into your first main point. What's an attention getter? That's the very first thing that you say, and it should not be, "Hi, my name is so-and-so, I'm going to talk to you about such and such." It should be something that really grabs their attention. That does not. You might want to start with a question. You might want to start with a story. You might want to make a startling statement. Everyone in this room is going to die. You might want to start with a startling statistic. 20% of all human beings will die before the year is out. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm just trying to make up a startling statistic. Or you might start out with something humorous. A rhetorical question is a question that doesn't expect an answer. So you're meant to be getting the audience members thinking, but you're not actually expecting them to respond. You could ask a question in which they are going to respond, but if you want the audience to respond, you have to incorporate their answers. So just asking a question, "How many of you do X?" and like, "Thanks," and then moving into your speech, ignoring their response, is actually dismissive of your audience. It is more likely to put them off. So in general, it's usually better to start with a rhetorical question. You could start with a story. Everybody likes to hear a story. This could be a real story of something that happened to you, or it can be a made-up story. It can be something that's happening now. It can be something from the past. It should obviously connect with your speech and set up the audience's interest in your speech. Maybe it poses a problem and your speech is going to pose a solution. Maybe it gives an example that allows the audience to connect so they start to care about what you're talking about. A startling statement, something that's intended to surprise your audience, to get their attention. A statistic is the same thing, but it is actually a statistic. This percentage of people will X, 1 in 5 people will Y. Your statistics should be true and accurate. They should not be made up. Stories can be made up, statistics not. Humor. It's great to start a speech with humor, but you have to be careful because your sense of humor may not be the same as the sense of humor of the audience. So it's very important that if you're going to start with a joke or something humorous, that is very connected to your speech topic. If it's connected to your speech topic, even if the audience doesn't find it funny, you can still use it as an introduction to your topic. If it's just a random joke and they don't laugh, then that is really going to throw both you and the audience off. So, the first statement that you're going to say is an attention getter. It should get your audience engaged and connected to your speech. It could be a rhetorical question, a story, a startling statement, a startling statistic, or something funny. to your audience. Why should they care about this topic? In order to do a good significant statement, you have to get out of your own head and into the heads of your audience. Everybody wants to know X is just not true. A lot of people are not interested in the same things you're interested in. So you really have to think about why this might be important to your audience. Is it a skill they could use? Is it a skill they could teach someone else? Is it information that they might want to pass on to somebody else? Is it going to help them be successful in something that they're doing? You've got to think about why they should care, not why you care, but why they should care. Credibility. Why are you qualified to talk about this? Assuming you've gotten them interested in the topic, why should they listen to you? Now that they know that they should care about X, why shouldn't they just go look it up on YouTube? So this is where you tell what your expertise or background is in this. Have you worked on this before? Have you taken a class in this? Have you done research? Have you done a lot of research just to give this speech? Whatever it is that makes you a credible source of information, you need to share that with the audience. So they are both, now you've got them interested in what you have to say, you've got them caring about it because it's important to them, and now you got to convince them that you're worth listening to about this topic. Then you have your thesis statement. This is a single declarative statement encapsulating the central idea or specific purpose of your speech, just like in a paper. This isn't, I'm going to tell you about X. It is a declarative statement. By the end of this speech, you will know how to X. It's very important that everyone knows how to Y. A definitive statement. And then the final step of the introduction is the preview. This is where you let your audience know what it is you're going to talk to them about. It's almost like a mini summary, but it comes at the beginning. So what are the main points? When you get into the body of the speech and you have your main points, and then under each main point is here's what I'm going to say about this, what you're doing in the preview is you're listing what those points are. You can sometimes combine those two, particularly if you're giving a shorter speech. So your thesis statement could include the preview. I'm going to tell you about fun things to do in Miami, which is going to include food, is going to include sites, and it's going to include activities. So you could break that up in two sentences, or you could combine it into one sentence. But what you're doing is giving the audience the broad outline of what it is you're going to talk to them about. So to review, the purpose of the introduction is to prepare the audience to listen to your speech. It should have 5 components: the intention getter, significance, credibility, thesis statement, preview, and then you transition into your first main point. Transitions. We've talked about these when we talked about signposting, transition statements, and internal summaries, which should be included as part of your speech and should be in your outline. Transitions are a bridge between one part of your speech to the next. They should appear between your introduction and your first main point, and then between each main point, and finally between your last main point and your conclusion. You can either connect those ideas or let the audience know that one part is ending and another part is beginning. Now we move on to the body of the speech. As you can see by this outline, as I've said before, the outline of a speech is very similar to the outline of a paper. Roman numeral 1 is the introduction, Roman numeral 2 is the main body, and that's going to consist of your various main points, your subpoints, and any supporting material you might provide for those subpoints. And then you transition into the conclusion. Notice that you're going to transition your main body. Your main body is going to have your main points and your subpoints. In general, a speech usually has between 3 to 5 main points, and each one of those will have subpoints. I say in general because that is going to depend on your speech goal and the length of time you have for speech. If you're giving a 2-hour speech, clearly you can get more main points in than if you're doing a 2-minute speech. But even if you have plenty of time, you don't want to overload your audience with main points. You really want to have 3 to 5 key ideas you're trying to get across, and what you can do is provide more complexity to each of those ideas if you have a longer period of time. Be sure you state the main points out loud as you begin to discuss it. You don't want your audience confused about where they are in your speech. So you have those main points, and then you're going to have subpoints, and then you're going to give supporting material. What kind of supporting material? You could do testimonies, analogies, statistics, stories, or examples. What's a testimony? The opinion of somebody who has seen it or an expert in whatever it is that you're talking about. When you're using testimony, always explain why the person whose testimony you're providing is an important person to listen to. So give their qualification, give a citation. So for example, in her book Speech Therapy, Dr. Sharon Milan states that you can eliminate the use of and other filler words by simply pausing. So we've said who it is and where we've gotten that information from. An analogy is comparing two different things and focusing on their likenesses. A computer is like a human brain because they both process information. Statistic is a numerical collection of fact. It's 60% fact. Statistics should be true and accurate, not made up. Story has a setup, a climax, and a conclusion. It should have some kind of suspense or conflict, something that gets the audience interested in it. Don't tell a boring story. That's going to defeat your purpose. But if you can tell a story that shows what it is that you're talking about, that can be great supporting information. You can give an actual example, either factual or it can be hypothetical, to illustrate your point. Now we're moving on to the conclusion. So we have our introduction, we have the body of our speech, and now we're on our conclusion. Every speech should have a solid conclusion. I would argue that the two most important parts of the speech are the introduction and the conclusion, because you've got to get their attention right away so they're hooked, and then you want to end strong. They're going to remember how you ended more than they're going to remember anything else. So in your conclusion, you want to review all the main points and then have a good final statement. You should memorize your concluding statement. So introduction and conclusion should be memorized. The middle you should just be super familiar with so that you can follow along using either PowerPoint or a piece of paper with some key words on it to remind you, this is what I was going to say next, this is what I was going to say next. But your conclusion should actually be memorized. For most speeches, a few sentences. So again, it's not that hard to memorize it. So use your transition into your conclusion. Whatever your transition statement is a cue to go into memorization. So you review the main points. So just like you did in the preview, remember the saying in speech giving is tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them. So you're just reviewing what those main points are. If we were to use my hypothetical things to do in Miami, you might just review those 3 points. So now we have talked about places to go, places to eat, and things to do. Or you could include key points, subpoints there. We've talked about great places to eat, X, Y, and Z, fun things to do, A, B, and C, great sightseeing spots, 1, 2, 3. That would be your summary, your review of your main points, and then you need a strong finishing statement. So many people will give a good speech and then just kind of trail off at the end. Yeah, so that's my speech. You've totally blown it. You need to have at the very least your last sentence memorized, and then you deliver it with a sense of finality. So you use your tone of voice and your energy to let them know that that's your closing statement. You could have something like, so now you all know how to X. Or next time your family comes, you'll have lots of great things for them to do when they come to you in Miami. So you want a good statement that matches what your speech is, and then you want to deliver it with a tone of finality. And finally, if you have used any kind of reference material, you want to provide a bibliography. If you are using resources, things you've looked up. For sure, you want a bibliography. You could also include here further references. So, for example, if you were doing something on things to do in Miami, maybe you provide links to those places in your bibliography. Or perhaps there's a website like the Miami Chamber of Commerce that shows other great things. Any of that can be put in your concluding materials. And that's all, folks. Now you know how to create a wonderfully organized speech.